Hello, everyone. I'm letting some more folks in here. Looks like we have a pretty good turnout. Let's see. Oh yeah, very good turnout. I guess people in the Portland area want to learn about bikes. Awesome. Okay, I think we can get started. Yep. Oh, one more person. Okay, cool. Keep an eye on that. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 Oregon Active Transportation Summit. My name is Henry Miller. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm the Grants and Impact Manager at the Street Trust. I also used to be a BIKETOWN employee, so I have the hat. I used to swap batteries for BIKETOWN, so I'm very excited for this presentation. Welcome to Towards Equity in Mobility. You can type your questions in the chat or use the raise the hand tool, both found at the bottom of your screen. Please use the social media hashtag OAT22 to post about the summit on social media. And don't forget to visit our website at thestreettrust.org to learn more about our other programs and activities. Now, without further delay, please welcome to your screen, Kanika Agrawal.
Thanks, Henry. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, I'd just like to thank the Street Trust for giving us the opportunity to share thoughts on this very important topic with you. My name is Kanika. I'll be moderating the panel today. Just a little bit about me. I'm the Associate General Manager for Lyft's bike share systems in Portland, that's BIKETOWN, as well as in San Francisco with Bay Wheels. And joining me here today are our two panelists, Kara Bader and Roshan Kurian. Kara and Roshan, I'd like to have you briefly introduce yourselves to the audience. Kara, can I have you go first?
Absolutely. Thanks, Kanika. And thanks again to the Street Trust for creating this forum for us to talk today. Really excited to be here with this group. As Kanika said, my name's Kara Bader. I'm a public policy manager with Lyft. Sometimes I say that's a fancy way of saying lobbyist. Other times it's really meaning that I help work with our local government partners and community partners to ensure that the systems that we are operating and implementing are best tailored to achieve those local policy goals. And so I work with the team here in Portland with the BIKETOWN system. I also work with a few of our other systems in Minneapolis, Denver, and Chicago. And I'm excited to be talking with you all today. I'll turn it over to Roshan.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Roshan Kurian. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a transportation demand management specialist in our active transportation and safety division at PBOT. So my role is really to educate and incentivize Portlanders to try more active ways of transporting. So I work on our policies and programs. My background is in public health. So I love making that connection to between health and transportation and now housing. Within this BIKETOWN group, I oversee our BIKETOWN for All program and the adaptive BIKETOWN program on the city side. And then I oversee also a couple of our pilot programs called Prescribe a Bike PDX, our Transportation Academy program, and our Transportation Wallet for residents in affordable housing. So those are some of the programs that I help oversee and work with Lyft and Nike to push out the BIKETOWN system.
Great, thank you. In today's discussion, we'll be touching on what it means to design and deliver equitable bike share and scooter share programs, what that has looked like here in Portland, and what we can learn from some other markets that Lyft operates in and that PBOT has had exposure to as well. So to start things off, Roshan, I'd love to hear from you. Tell us a little bit more about why equity is such an important consideration and what types of barriers you've seen riders face in the work that you've done.
Sure. So we've been hearing it all day. Equity matters in transportation because everyone deserves a right to access a safe and affordable way to move around in the city that we live in. And so that includes options that are prioritizing our health and our well-being, our wallet, the planet, just to be a part of a livable city. And so bike share can be for those that are transit dependent. They're operating 24/7. If you can't wait on a bus or the MAX, it's there if you have access to it in the system. And it's just a really great option. So I'm just thankful to be a part of a team that collaboratively works across PBOT in the city with larger organizations like Lyft and Nike with more resources to help us meet our climate and our transportation justice goals. And with our community partners, we're making sure that the needs of our community are at the forefront and that we're collectively visualizing something and a place that's more than just livable. We need to feel connected to our city, especially right now. It's such a priority. We need to get to our appointments, our jobs, our families. We need to buy ourselves food. We need to exercise. We need to connect to the businesses and the green spaces that we have. And so, as we're talking about bike share access for Portlanders, of course, we have to think about the barriers that keep us from that access. So for folks that are living on low incomes, which, as we can imagine, is kind of a growing population right now, it's a challenging space to work in with so many different factors that intersect our work every day, like housing and personal safety and health. And so we have to be innovative. We have to be collaborative. We have to make sure we're addressing the needs of our city holistically, that we're not harming and that we're focused on producing an option for people to move around safely. And so bike share has actually kind of a critical and a very sweet opportunity in how we connect those things. And so some of the things that we've seen, people may not even know about BIKETOWN. If they do, they may call it the Nike bikes, the orange bikes, something else. It may not be in their part of town, but if it is, how do we get the word out and how do we connect to people in the spaces that they're already in, speaking in ways that they understand and surrounding the needs of that they have. And if it's not part of that community, how do we change and advocate for that if that's what they want? So a few other barriers that I think of off the top of my head that we deal with kind of on a daily basis with folks living on low income. If you're unbanked or underbanked, or you don't want to connect your fixed income to a platform where even a small charge or fee can be devastating right in the moment. So that's one thing we come in contact with as far as a barrier. And then another thing is tech accessibility at different levels, depending on which part of the community that we're working in. So now that we have the opportunity to work with youth, people 16 and older who now can access the system with our new 2.0 e-bikes, this group is more likely to have phones, understand how apps work and tech works, how BIKETOWN account works, and it's easier for us to communicate or engage through those methods. And so that may not be the case with our homeless or houseless population. Some of our older BIKETOWN riders, having a consistent phone number, remembering passwords associated, people's Apple ID, their email address, having consistent data to handle usage of the app. There's many frustrating little pieces to overcome. So we try to be there in person to walk them through that process, close the loop between sign up and actually riding. And so those are some of the things. If you don't have a phone or your phone dies, you have data issues, you can request a card that can unlock the bikes. If you're part of BIKETOWN for All, you get access to a $10 prepaid card that we add to your account to get you started. So a couple of the barriers that we try to address through some very simple solutions. And then another barrier is feeling safe riding on the streets. So how can we encourage people to be out there riding on the streets if it feels dangerous? What information can we consistently collect through the relationships that we build, and through qualitative and quantitative measures that help us understand what to do and how to communicate better as a team, right? So I remember a high school student from our Transportation Academy pilot at Alliance High School last year saying that, you know, what sometimes when they're traveling home and there's certain blocks or certain parts of town that they want to get through quicker and they don't want to walk through, right? And so it might be great to be on a BIKETOWN bike where you can just zip through that block, or, you know, quickly just get through an area where you feel uncomfortable. And it just made me think, I do it all the time. We all, you know, have probably felt unsafe at different times and you want to get through an area quicker. So it just, things like that help click into how we talk about and how we connect over safety in our streets and what role BIKETOWN can play in that. Another barrier is how do we make sure that our bike share system takes into consideration all levels of ability? So how do we grow our adaptive BIKETOWN people for folks with disabilities or who can't ride the BIKETOWN orange bikes? So we need to continue to figure that out based off of the needs that are ever changing, right? So there's a huge amount of capacity required to be everywhere at once. So another area or another thing we're trying to address is capacity, and just how do we equip the community, people with the knowledge and opportunities, the excitement within to want to engage with their own family and friends, and how do we work with our community partners, offer that support, help fund their efforts, show up where we can, build up ambassadors, because that's how we can have actual impact, right? Not just a bunch of P-botters and lifters telling you to ride this awesome bike because it's awesome, but because your friend or your family member, you know, pulled you out on a bike and you went for a ride on the waterfront with the wind in your hair, and then you're like, wow, I really needed this. This is great. So having those moments is what we're trying to build up organically. And you know, I think Ashton had mentioned earlier, just prioritizing being out there, educating and showing up and working to understand what keeps people from riding is really kind of the beginning of our work, right? So yeah, that's just a glimpse of some of the issues that we're trying to tackle together.
Great, thanks, Roshan. Your comment on personal safety really resonates with me. I'd seen a study that says something like 22% of lower income folks of color state that a big barrier to riding is, you know, worries about being harassed or becoming a victim of a crime. And just to put that in context, that compares with higher income white folks at something like 7% of respondents having that as a concern on their mind. So there's definitely a very clear discrepancy there, and a lot of work that needs to be done to address that. Kara, I want to flip it over to you and get your thoughts on the same question of why equity is such an important consideration in your work.
Thanks, Kanika. Yeah, I mean, I think taking a step back and looking at the big picture, Lyft as an organization as a whole is really committed and dedicated to supporting the existence of thriving urban areas by connecting people to the world's best transportation. And we recognize that that takes many forms, and that is very different community by community and person by person in terms of what can be best and most empower them via transportation access. I think as we think about bike sharing in particular, BIKETOWN being one program, as well as other systems that we support, you know, we in some ways are helping to provide a form of urban infrastructure, urban transportation infrastructure that not only supports a way to get around, that can connect gaps in transit service schedules or gaps in communities that are less served from frequency from transit or have less high car ownership. But that infrastructure is also a service to people. People have to be able to access it. There is a way to access it, and it involves paying for rides in most circumstances. And, you know, there's a long history of the conversations around infrastructure and infrastructure planning not always being equitable in the communities that we operate in. And many of the communities where we're providing bike sharing have a history of systemic disinvestment from either their local government or the federal government as a result of very car-centric policymaking. And we really have an opportunity to be forward thinking about how bike sharing can help address the gaps that exist in that transportation network as a result, and that we can be proactive about not necessarily recreating or exacerbating inequities that already exist. And so I think we prioritize taking that head on and not taking for granted that, all things held equal, if we just make bikes available, that there will be an equitable outcome. I think in terms of the real, person-to-person level work, a lot of the barriers and influences that Roshan cited really resonate with how the experiences that we have, not only in Portland, but in other markets, have evolved in terms of really wanting to hear from people the very personal stories of how they get around today, whether or not those choices are the choices that best serve them. Are they interested in other ways to get around, and are they interested in biking? And in many cases, when they answer to, are you interested in biking? Have you done it before? Come out, it's not always like, no, I'm not interested. It's that I'm not really sure what this is. I'm not really sure how to learn about the system. I'm not really sure that I'm comfortable trying it out. And so, taking those barriers as really personal and nuanced and case by case situations, you really find that there becomes kind of like a strategy for meeting different groups and different populations where they are within the community, and trying to really empower them to feel comfortable and to feel excited about taking trips on BIKETOWN, about using micromobility as a transportation tool that serves them. And some of that is, programmatic changes that we make. But also, as Roshan indicated, some of that is most effectively just finding messengers that people know and trust and care about and really ally with as a member of their community, so that it's not necessarily a conversation about, here's a service we provide, are you interested in it? But it's how can we empower you to use this in a way that benefits your daily life, and that true access to the world's greatest transportation is the choice that makes sense for you and your family, and really gets you where you need to go.
Great, thank you, Kara. To build on that a little bit, can you tell us a little bit more about BIKETOWN specifically and what types of programs we've implemented here to connect to equity goals?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll highlight a few to start, and then happy to turn it over to Roshan as well. I mean, our main program in terms of access and opportunity here is the BIKETOWN for All program. It's a low cost and practically no cost membership program for residents that are qualifying for certain forms of public assistance, to be able to access the system and ride largely for free, in a way that it means that the kind of annual membership cost, or calculating per ride per minute, that few dollars that it adds up to, that's not really a discouraging factor in terms of someone that hasn't yet signed up for BIKETOWN and may be on public assistance or maybe on housing assistance, that they have an opportunity to get out and ride and use this as a part of their transportation toolbox. We recently expanded that program to offer eligibility also to students that are receiving any form of public financial assistance, financial aid, so like a Pell Grant or a FAFSA loan from the university. And that's a really great way to make sure that people, as they're in this sort of new transitional state in life, if you're a student, that you have a way to get to class and maybe your other job that's really easy and suits your needs. And that low cost membership program is a type of program that we offer in almost every market that we're in. The second program that I'll talk about is Adaptive BIKETOWN. And this is a program that really is frankly homegrown with PBAT, and owns the, leverages the BIKETOWN brand, but is an adaptive mobility program that addresses the barriers that residents of different mobility barriers, of different physical abilities might have in getting on a BIKETOWN bike in particular, as opposed to some other bicycle or tricycle or hand cycle that is better suited to their physical needs at that point in time. And so Adaptive BIKETOWN has been a partnership that's been able to provide that access to people that might be interested in getting on a bike, but the BIKETOWN bike isn't the best fit for them, and make sure that they still have a really accessible way to get out and ride and enjoy the fun. And maybe I'll turn it over to Roshan to maybe talk about some of the other programming that kind of wraps around BIKETOWN for All, as well as Adaptive BIKETOWN, and helps kind of augment the success of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we work really hard to work across our programs in active transportation and safety, and then with our transportation justice work, but also in conjunction with our capital projects, and finding ways to leverage funding and the connections that we have in the community. And so our efforts are kind of focused on two major kind of buckets. And one of them is just getting on the bike and riding, just signing up. And so we have a slew of programs that kind of focus on that. And one of that is the Transportation Ambassador Program. That's our volunteer force. Here's some of our lovely ambassadors on the screen, actually. And we are recruiting right now through the end of the month. So that's a quick plug right now. If you want to be more engaged with transportation outreach, feel connected to government work, especially if you are 16 and older and you want to join the squad, we definitely would love to have you. And there's opportunities to learn about jobs and how to apply for city jobs, and have connections through other training opportunities. So that's one of the programs that I work with across our active transportation team. And then also we work together with the Safe Routes team now. We've been doing a transportation academy with Alliance High School Meek campus. That's where we piloted a program during COVID, where their students were not getting out and having their physical activity opportunity. And so we worked to give PE credit. We did a virtual 6-week class. They got English credit. And I'll also be talking about that on Wednesday. So if anyone's interested in the Transportation Academy work, we'll be sharing a little bit more about that. And that was a really great way to one, just start engaging with high schoolers. That was the first time, and we needed to see what specific barriers existed there, and how can we roll this out across PPS. So let's focus on a few folks and make sure sign up makes sense, and that people have access to helmets and things like that. So that's one group. And then we have Prescribe a Bike, which is a Prescribe a Bike program under BIKETOWN for All. And so that's connecting youth and Multnomah County Health Center patients to e-bike education, again, support with sign up, connection to these encouragement, community group rides, learn to ride opportunities, and then funding for essentially unlimited rides with the Prescribe a Bike program. And so really making that connection to preventative medicine and to folks that living with chronic diseases that could benefit from physical activity. And then we also have, BIKETOWN is also connected to our Transportation Wallet program. And we have a family of programs within Transportation Wallet, where we have the program in parking districts, and we have a program with new movers, and we have another one with residents of affordable housing. And so we offer either BIKETOWN Value or BIKETOWN for All Access, which again is essentially free access if you park at the stations. So that is all kind of around just signing up folks, getting them on the bikes, and then we have another bucket of just a higher level of access to transportation choices. And so that's really showing up places and where we're asked to be at and where we, slide into. And so last year we were at over 50 outreach events with freebies and free rides. And we've been doing things like Earth Weekend. If y'all were able to get out this past weekend, we had the highest ridership this past weekend. And we go where folks are meeting for different celebrations, and we come out to Gresham for Juneteenth, and we bring bikes and do group rides and organize group rides. We work across our programs to make sure we're connected to Sunday parkways and to what other people are already doing, and just show up with bikes and with what we have, and try to connect with people through these orange bikes. And so that's kind of how we tie it all together, and how our programs kind of all work together.
Great, thank you. Yeah, totally second that. This was a beautiful weekend and we saw some pretty great ridership. So hopefully that will continue through the rest of the season. Roshan, let me follow up on that and ask you a little bit more about BIKETOWN's program and system design. Can you tell us how equity has been taken into consideration while thinking about how the system is designed and set up?
Sure. So some things have, changed a lot. A lot of things have changed, even just with the e-bike system. We have just a new bike, a new way to manage it, a new pricing structure. So those are all a lot of things that have changed. Some things have stayed the same because some of the needs are still the same. So the option for unbanked or underbanked individuals, for someone without access to a phone, who need more opportunities to learn about BIKETOWN and where to ride. Those are all things that haven't changed. So we've kind of continued to accommodate that and make sure that's at the forefront. And then, thankfully our team has a very strong focus on equity, and we prioritize our funding. We show up, like I mentioned, for over however many events that we can. We do free ride promotions. We utilize resources from marketing resources from Lyft and Nike, and those opportunities that allows us to have beautiful photographs of actual users, not just models, but people that are using the system, share those stories and connect it to design and to jobs and a wealth of other things. So that's kind of how we've continued to use the resources that we have. And then it shows in the number of BIKETOWN for All members. We've doubled that within the year before and this year, and it's just consistently growing. And I just mentioned we had the highest ridership with this past weekend. So just recognizing that, finding more ways to fund those opportunities to make sure our policies and what we say and what we do are aligning with our climate goals and our transportation justice goals, and making sure people have access to that. And then beyond that, we have contractual requirements that around the number of bikes that are out in the world, and what the plans are for expansion, and how we do that with aligning it with the ridership and the system health, and how can we manage all of that together. And so just thinking of where we can go with BIKETOWN next, and how do we make sure we're doing that responsibly. How do we connect, especially to a lot of our communities that have been pushed out of the central city? How do we do that effectively? And where the roads are not the same, there's, the high crash corridors there aren't safety measures in place. How do we do that together responsibly? So additionally, we have higher road standards, and that's a requirement for Lyft and subcontractors that offer a proper wage and benefits package and are producing economic opportunity for a diverse workforce that ensures that people throughout our community are included in this work. So those are just a few of the ways that things have changed and how we prioritize equity and how we're moving forward.
Great, thank you. Kara, could you answer that question for us from a Lyft perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we try to think of, the ways that we can augment our kind of like core system design to make sure that we aren't throwing up additional barriers for residents, kind of just based on lack of thinking through another way of when we know that there's a really common barrier. And so like we've done that obviously through our low cost access program, but when we think about a program like Bike Angels too, which is a program that allows riders to gain credits towards more rides on the system by taking an action that takes a bike from an area where we already have a few more bikes than we normally would need and park it at a station that has maybe less bikes than we would want, knowing what the future demand later in that day is. By incentivizing riders who are kind of willing to take those types of trips, and maybe they have a little extra time to go a block or two out of their way, it helps build ownership within the system. It helps give people a way to continue to ride at lower costs or no cost, that we think is kind of a double benefit, a benefit for us as well as a benefit for riders. We've also gone so far as to create an NFC card unlocking option for riders that don't have a smartphone, or that have a smartphone but maybe want to save on their data access and don't want to be opening the app every time, because for many users you don't always have unlimited data, or they continue to find ways to raise the price every year. And I think that we're thinking through also, how do we reduce the barriers even to the sign up process for things like our low income access program, where you used to have to fill out a form online, and you would send a picture of your document that showed that you were eligible, and then someone in our central office would look at it, and maybe that would take a day or two. Like, we know that those things are now such a hassle factor that someone might drop out and choose not to take that trip for the first time. And so we've worked to build a process where you can sign up through a marketing code, and that might mean that our staff that's at an event, or Roshan that's at an event that's standing and talking next to someone that we know that qualifies, can get signed up as a BIKETOWN for All member on the spot and start riding right away. And so we try to take as many of those steps as possible to make access to the system as close to the individual as possible, so that really it's not on them to figure it all out. It's on us to make it easy. And then I think another really great example that actually Kanika, I might ask you to talk about, is the super hub zone in Portland. I think that's a unique thing that Lyft has done in Portland in particular with BIKETOWN. And we've kind of looked to model that in some of the other systems we run, but started here as a system strategy. And so maybe you want to talk a little bit about that one.
Yeah, definitely. The super hub zone is something that was part of BIKETOWN 1.0 as well. And I believe that was the genesis of the idea and where it comes from. The way it has manifested in this version of BIKETOWN with the all e-bike system is that east of 72nd Avenue, we essentially have an area that appears green on the map if you're looking at the app, and essentially it goes from 72nd all the way to 135th as far as the service area goes out east. And users can park their bikes anywhere within that area without incurring an out-of-station fee. The idea there being that we're still working on citing viable station sites in East Portland. We know that will be an ongoing challenge for some time to come. And so in the meantime, we wanted to provide flexibility and not sort of put this additional onus and burden on riders that are in East Portland to go find a station, and that if they don't, there might be a fee. So when we did our recent expansion in January, we also expanded the boundary of that super hub zone to include the expanded service area in East Portland. But yeah, thank you for asking that question. I agree that that has proven to be pretty helpful, with something like 45% of our rides ending outside of stations. It's definitely something that users really appreciate. I think we have time for one more question for our panelists, and then I'd like to give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions. So maybe we'll spend just about 2 minutes on this next question. But Kara, I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit more about equity programs in other cities that you've come across.
Yeah, and I'll just be brief, getting so we can leave time for questions. In the other systems that we operate, as I indicated before, one common through line is the low-cost access program. And we really try to tailor those market by market based on certain eligibility factors and programmatic needs. So in the Bay Area, there's a program called BikeShare for All. Minneapolis has Nice Ride for All, and Chicago has Divvy for Everyone. But certain eligibility factors there might depend on the local transit system's equity access program, and that being something like an automatic qualifier, or maybe a local housing benefit program that kind of strays from the norm. We want to make sure that we are tailoring our access into our system based on the common touch points that our local DOT partners as well as human service partners might have in reaching communities that might face barriers to riding. And then in many of them, as we've been talking, we really resource community partners to be great ambassadors for us in speaking about bike sharing and helping to connect our systems to riders that may want or be empowered by another way to get around. And so those community partners can identify more authentic messengers that would be able to speak to riders in communities that historically maybe aren't thinking about bike sharing. And they can also be great partners in terms of enrolling people in programs and aligning those programs with other initiatives that they have to support transportation access. So a great example of this was in Chicago. We worked with a neighborhood housing partner that actually really was starting to consider how they could advocate for safe transportation infrastructure in their community. And we leveraged that partnership to allow them to have a voice in where we would plan a next wave of stations that were also going in their community for the Divvy bike sharing system. And so we really want to try to find those community partners and messengers, and it's a great thing that PBOT has done. It's a great resource that they have as many community connections here. And we try to build on that model in the other systems where we operate. And I think it's that combination of really on the ground community partners that can meet people where they are with a broad, accessible, income eligible membership program that helps make sure that we're building those habits through a membership and through kind of a repeated access to a system that helps support this as a mode of transit that we think is very successful and we feel like is a part of the fabric as we move forward in any of the communities where we're serving.
Thank you, Kara. We have a question here in the chat that I'm just going to pose to the two of you. So we haven't talked about e-scooters very much, and a lot of the considerations in designing equity programs for bikes and scooters tend to be similar in terms of how riders access devices through the app, what barriers they may face in terms of pricing, and several other challenges that we've already talked about. Can either of you think of anything that we haven't touched on yet that's unique to scooters and would be relevant to talk about?
I mean, I think the only thing that I would add here is taking, for an example, a system like Nice Ride, or this will be coming up in Chicago. We are really interested in moving towards combined membership and eligibility programs where a rider can have a membership like a BIKETOWN membership, and they could be able to access a bike as a vehicle or an e-scooter as a vehicle, all within kind of one membership package. And all within one service, so that it really makes it easy to get around and kind of have those choices without any sort of additional friction through another operator.
Yeah, I wouldn't have much else to add to that. Just trying to think of, even with the transportation wallet, like how do we combine as many things as possible? You know, whether it's a sign up process, or whether it's within an app, or whether it's a way of payment. You know, we're just trying to find the least amount of bumps to get access to basically all of the options, and see how they work together. So I'm hoping now that we've completed the scooter pilots and we're moving into our more into our permanent program, that it will be more of a joint effort. We'll be out there together at more community events and educating and signing folks up at the same time.
Great, thank you. So I think we have just 5 minutes left here. I want to open it up to anybody who wants to come off mute and ask a question, or feel free to post it in the chat. Right, not seeing any questions yet. I will pose another question as we're waiting for folks to think about what they might want to ask you. We talked a lot about current state, and I'm curious to know, Roshan, where do you see opportunities for further growth and improvements as it relates to BIKETOWN program?
So I think continuing to find funding opportunities for growing BIKETOWN for All and adaptive. Just, it's all kind of been patchwork here and there. And so finding something more consistent and longer term. We've had a big grant from PGE for BIKETOWN for All. We had a grant from Better Bike Share Partnership for Prescribe a Bike, to provide kind of that level of engagement, the helmets, the education, the materials, like it all requires time and effort, right? So finding ways to grow those opportunities and to be out there and signing people up and getting them comfortable on bikes is definitely a place that we can continuously grow. With Adaptive BIKETOWN, re-engaging with the work group this year. We just had a survey out and a call for people to join the work group to see what the next phase of adaptive looks like. We added more bikes, we added e-assist to more of the bikes, we wrapped them in the adaptive branding that we came up with Nike's Ability Network, and just finding ways to be more of a cohesive system between Adaptive BIKETOWN and BIKETOWN, and how do we want to continue to grow that program as well. I think we could do a lot with our connection to capital delivery work and being more in tune with the projects across the city, how we can cross promote, how we can activate new projects and safety measures, how we can collect that feedback more consistently and continue to share what we hear from the community in the spaces that we're working in. We're all working towards the same goals, but not necessarily talking to one another at times, and we're in our small bubbles. So consistently trying to work on that collaboration. And then I think we need to do a better job of reporting and more consistently finding different ways to share data and information. I think as we've seen the sign up process, if that could just get easier and easier so that it's not a barrier at all for sign up, that would be wonderful. And so making sure that everyone's account is active, if not understanding why, whether we need to fix something on the tech side or educate further on how to use the system, making sure people understand charges, how to not park outside of the service area, try to bring it to a station, or it's okay if you're in the super hub. So kind of all those details and making sure that it's a good user experience for people so that they keep coming back and they see it as a viable and a positive addition into their life. That's our goal, essentially.
Thanks, Roshan. And speaking of the service area, we have a question here in the chat that I can answer. As far as service area expansions, we did one in January of this year. And prior to that, last year, PBOT and Lyft had launched a survey to collect community feedback on where people would like to see us expand, where they would like to see new stations, essentially where they're riding and where they'd like to go in the future. So there's definitely some intentional effort behind where we're expanding, but also just to shed some light on the contract itself, to Roshan's point earlier about there being contractual requirements that were designed with equity in mind. For this particular expansion that we did in January, we had a goal of expanding in North and East Portland specifically to meet some of those equity goals. And that was an important factor in informing which neighborhoods we decided to serve with this last expansion. And I expect that that will continue to be a factor as we go forward. With that, I think we are out of time and we may have to follow up on this last question offline, but I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. Thank you to the Street Trust, and thank you, Kara and Roshan, for answering our questions.
Thank you. We're happy to follow up with, feel free to message us separately if you have other questions.